Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Today we got Winter Raviesse, the character review released just yesterday for Global, the new winter unit this year. Now, kicking things off, we're going to go through the normal presentation here, the character overview, base and total stat analysis, some other metrics, all leading up to the report card, which I give her some grades on those attributes, as well as a little preview into the class and job overview, which is exceptionally important to understand the final rating of the character. I'm going to talk a little about her AI priorities and a little bit about a faith analysis for what you want to get her to for a faith target, with the TMR review, general thoughts, and then some Esper Synergies and weapon optimization just to get the ball rolling. So the character overview, brand new ice unit, does seem like the 10th one we've had in the last 2 months. They've given her the unique main job of Great Knight with the Knight and Paladin subjobs as well. She does equip great swords and helms, arms, and accessories, so heavier armor unit with a move of 3, jump of 1 as a cost 70 unit. From a resistance perspective, she does start off fairly strong here, both 20% to pierce and missile, 5% to slash, neutral to magic with the minus 10% to strike, and from an ailment perspective, she does have 50% to both charm and sleep with 10% to disable. Now, sleep you don't see as often, but charm can be relatively devastating. The faith of this character is rather debatable. She's got a couple status ailments that you probably do want to lean into, but not terribly heavily. I'm going to do a big comparison in a little bit, looking at 50, 75, and 97 faith. I do think 75 actually is a nice sweet spot, though. Kind of a spoiler for what's to come. But because of that, you should be cognizant about what you can be afflicted by and what you can resist. Now, getting to the base stat of things, overall HP-wise does start off in a pretty good spot here. Most of these characters that you see in the, we'll say like 3,700 to above are the tanks. So from a DPS perspective, she does start relatively high on that scale. From an attack perspective, also relatively high. Certainly not with the tops of the game, but doesn't need to be. From an agility perspective, does start rather low at 54 base agility. She does recover a bit from that with the board, though. We'll see in just a minute here. Dexterity-wise, relatively average, and the same thing for luck, relatively average. I don't think there's anything that particularly stands out here as a strength or a weakness, because even the agility, even though it's on the lower side, she doesn't end up being a slow unit per se. Now we look at the total stat analysis, kind of reconfiguring those charts to this bar chart to get that relative strength idea. Attack obviously is one of her most noteworthy ones. But when we incorporate the board statistics, the mastery ability, things of that nature, there are some significant changes. She does take a small step back here compared to the other UR units when it comes to total attack. She does get a ton of agility points though on her board, and then they do give her a below average amount of dexterity and luck compared to other units. So if you were to kind of analyze the sources of that, they've given her 14 agility on the board, which to date is the highest they've ever given any unit for a board agility. And the dexterity and luck values are fine, they're just a little bit lower than what you might expect from many other units. Overall, not a terrible starting spot. I wouldn't say there's necessarily any glaring weaknesses yet. Now we look at the crit hit and crit avoid, which both scale respectively off of her dexterity and her luck stat. Again, they're both like average to a little bit below average, so these metrics also reflect that, with the below average critical hit rate and the slightly below average critical avoid rate as well. From an accuracy perspective, she actually is fairly accurate innately, but she doesn't have any passives that boost her accuracy, which most, if not many, characters do, which is the difference between the blue lines and the green lines here, where once you start equipping passives, she does fall relatively far behind where everyone else gets that little bump up to. But there's something slightly misleading about this. I don't always incorporate these kinds of things into my analyses, but we've gotten more and more weapons released recently that have very strong character effects on them, and one of them is her greatsword, where it does give her 15 accuracy, which you will have this equipped, I would say, a majority of the time. And if that's the case, then this yellow triangle on the green does move fairly significantly up this list here, just from that weapon alone. So overall accuracy is not actually in a bad spot whatsoever. When we look at evasion, not an evade unit, not high enough luck for any potential there, so don't even worry about it. Which brings us finally to the overall report card. So effective HP, I'm actually going A- overall. Definitely skews a little more toward the physical side of things with the innate 10 defense. She also has a physical shield, which she can give herself. She also has courage, and her HP is actually relatively high when you build her out, that even the magic side of things ends up being relatively high compared to other units. Now again, no spirit, and she's neutral to magic, so it's not like she has an anti-magic strength per se, but her health pool is high enough that the effective HP still stays up there. Now from a primary stat perspective, going a B+ here, she does have a good attack percent passive. Ice also has some great vision card support for attack as well, so overall, primary stat doesn't suffer at all, even though she might be just a step below where that top tier is. Agility-wise, going with a straight C is absolutely average here. With the 15% and 8% main and sub vision card, she ends up at 80 agility, which is the UR average, and she's got no way to increase that via passives or anything. Accuracy-wise, I am going B. She's actually at a really good starting spot for innate accuracy, and you obviously can build that up, but Ice has some things going against it at the moment where they don't have a 35% luck vision card, and the only accuracy percent up is on the regular Odin vision card, and then Chaos Odin has kind of replaced that card. So if you are looking for accuracy, she could be a lot higher. You just have to get kind of creative in how you do so. So the accuracy, although is definitely above average, is at a good starting spot. I'm going with a B here, a little conservative. Now evasion-wise, it's C-, not an evade unit. Movement's also a straight C. Base movement, no ways around it. Passives, I'm going B+ here. Now on paper, she's actually got superb passives. Like you would give her an A even. You obviously can only pick 2, and she's kind of hard stuck on 2 of them in my opinion. Maybe you can flex 1. We'll see that in just a couple slides though. So overall, B+ I think is a pretty lenient grade. Counter, I'm also going B+ here. It's not that they're great counters, but she does have a really good counter ability for what kind of build she has. Overall kit, I'm going with a B. Very nice utility to be honest, which is her main selling point. Not really damage in my opinion. She obviously does do damage. It's certainly material enough, but her strength really lies in the utility. And to that end, the overall kit is good. It's just not exceptional. I think B is pretty accurate. But the final grade, I'm going B- here. She's a good 70 cost unit. I'll be honest, I think she's probably one of the best winter units you can get out of the selection of the 6 of them. She does have some more niche application though, with some downsides that we're going to see throughout the rest of the presentation here. Now the passive abilities. On paper, all of these sound really good. I'm going to go through them all real quickly and then tell you my 2 favorites. Great Knight Mastery here, 36% attack buff, 50 defense penetration. This is obviously an excellent one. Divine Protection here has the debuff resistance of 15% and AoE resistance of 12. Now again, it's a reminder for debuff resistance. That means it's a percentage that you do not get debuffed. So if someone goes, attack % down, you have a 15% chance that it happens not at all. It's either happens or not happens, one or the other. Now, Unwavering Spirit, this is 12% pierce and missile resistance, kind of leaning into her innate resistances as we saw a couple slides ago. Holy Knight's Protection is the 12 defense and the 12% HP, and Knight Lore is the 15% HP, but it's also 40% slash attack resistance penetration. Now, personally, Great Knight Mastery is going to be on 100% of the time for me. I actually think Knight Lore is probably going to be on the majority of the rest of the time as well. But I do think that's one that you can flex, and I'm going to talk about this a couple times, but the slash res penetration is going to be a statistic you're going to have to actively manage in terms of where she gets it in her kit, because she's a 100% slash type unit. I personally like Knight Lore second best here just for the consistency of damage, but I actually see good opportunities here for Divine Protection and Holy Knight's Protection as well. Probably Divine Protection more often because of the 12 AoE resistance. Now the counter abilities Endure and Sword Guard are actually identical abilities. They're both 20% chance to proc, and they both reduce all kinds of damage by 30%. So I think both of these are actually pretty good for her survivability. Obviously, either one is applicable. Paladin's Guard is if you're skewing more toward anti-physical, which is another great one. 45% damage reduction instead from physical attacks. Obviously more potent, but you kind of get exposed to the magic side of things. Now the main job, we're going to look at the buffs here in particular first. Negation Order is an AoE ability to party where it will dispel auto restore anytime you attack an enemy. So for enemy teams that use a lot of AP regeneration, whether that's Zizabels or it's an ability in their kit, this obviously is good, but I don't think this is an ability you're going to use often. I would probably have this off most of the time. Instill Sealed Endurance is really the main buff that you're going to be using first. I'll talk about it in the AI priorities in just a couple minutes here, but this is a 50% damage barrier to her, and it increases the pierce resistance to herself and allies by 20% and the reaction block rate, so reducing the enemy counter chance by 50% for 3 turns to allies as well. She will only use this one once and not run in circles because the physical barrier, once she applies it to herself, she will not reapply physical barrier twice. So that's actually pretty smart for her AI. Now we get into the offensive abilities of the main job here. Crippling Cut is the cheapest one at 14 AP. It's an attack break, 43%. Brute Force is an interesting second ability here where it dispels protect from an enemy, 200% modifier, but it is strike type damage. So it doesn't get some of those slash modifiers that you might normally get. Also has 25% chance to inflict stun. Great Slash is really my favorite ability in her kit. This is an AoE, and I'll show you a bigger picture of these ranges in a second here, but it's an AoE, 165% break physical barrier for targets. For those of you that are having trouble with Halloween Lucia, I particularly like this ability that's an AoE barrier break. And then Great Guillotine here is Dispel Courage to enemy. It's another 200% modifier, but this one is the slash type attack as opposed to the strike attack of the Brute Force. It also decreases AP of 15 to the target. Now, when we look at the heights and ranges, they are all basically limited to height of 1. Great Slash at least has the AoE height of an extra 1, so there's some extra play there. But overall, the other 3 abilities, as you can see, are unit attack oriented, and they're all cross-shaped in how you have to line yourself up. So I think that you're going to get some difficulty sometimes maneuvering on certain maps to get into the proper position to attack characters. Now for the sub-job here, Great Knight, I actually like one of these abilities. Ground Pound Ice is a pretty great ability that it is a double hit, only 23 AP, it's a 30% ice in peril, and you can see it's not that cross-shaped lineup where you can get a little more play in terms of the angle and the diagonal in which you attack an enemy. Silencing Sweep is an interesting one that it's another AoE ability here. 25% chance to inflict silence, but this is obviously really only good if you're going against heavy magic teams, which Just mentioned a second ago, Halloween Lucia, like, maybe you will be. So this actually does have some potential to be used. The second job here, though, the Knight Subjob, I'm actually not a real big fan of this job. The modifiers are too low. It's too close range. The breaks aren't impactful enough, in my opinion. You might get some PvE usage out of Trinity Break here with the attack magic and agility debuff. There is technically slash attack res penetration on this one as well, but actually managing this attack to be used is just not going to happen, so don't rely on that slash res pen. And Divine Healing actually is a very good buff. I just don't know if it's a good enough to dedicate a whole sub job to it, but that's obviously a little niche to what you're seeing. Now, the Paladin Subjob, the third one here, this one does have Immortal Courage on it. That's obviously the best ability on here. I do think Blade Bash and Sentinel are other good ones. I will say, though, Immortal Spirit is definitely lower on her overall AI priority list, so this job's really only as good as whether or not you can get that buff off, and even then, it's only one-time usage. So I think it's debatable what the best subjob is, but I actually think the Great Knight Subjob might be one of my more favorites of the three. And then just in the future, Courage is actually going to get a buff here where it's also going to nullify Confusion and Paralyze just for that status element conversation. Now the Limit Break, this is a really good one. It increases defense penetration of 30 for 3 turns. It's another pretty good mid-range AoE, 200% modifier, but the big thing here is the 67% chance to inflict Frostbite. Obviously that's a very devastating status effect for those of you that have seen a lot of Alaya in the game so far. And that's why the Faith conversation is so important, to make sure that you actually get to use the Frostbite as consistently as you want. We'll get to that in a minute here. Now the auto priorities, she does prefer her physical barrier first, so she will move to a teammate or just use it on herself to create the physical barrier and the pierce res and the reduced counter chance. The second priority here is actually the ability of her vision card. I wanted to make sure to include this here because many people are probably curious how that plays into things, and this is an exceptionally good ability in my opinion. It's a 35% magic barrier for 3 times and also decreases AP consumption for herself and allies as well. That's second priority if you have that turned on. The third one here is Negation Order. This is the Dispel Auto Restore. Again, I don't love this ability because if you're kind of piecing things together, Immortal Spirit comes after that, which I would rather have before. And then finally, the TMR actually appears to be last from some of my preliminary testing. So definitely some decisions to be made in terms of what you want on and off, depending upon what you want her to activate. Now for the Faith analysis, I'm gonna look at the Limit Break here specifically first. There's gonna be a lot of numbers, so don't worry too much about reading all of it in depth. But if you keep her at 50 Faith, I have a couple scenarios here. The top 2 are an enemy that has 50 and 97 Faith, and then the bottom 2 are if they have the 25% frostbite resistance that you get on the Trust Stone. So in the top scenario, if you're going against a 50 Faith unit, it's a 67% chance to apply, which is a little bit lower in my opinion. I would have liked to see that a little higher, which is why I do recommend a slightly higher Faith. If it's someone with 97 Faith, it's basically 100% chance. And if they have 25% resistance, which they might because Alaya is pretty common, those obviously reduce fairly drastically. Now, if you give Raviesse 97 Faith instead, a lot of those numbers do bump up. In that enemy 50 Faith example, it's now from 67% to 98%, so basically guaranteed. And even if the enemy has 25% resistance to it, you still retain 62% and 81% chance to proc. So overall, still really strong, but 97 might be a little overkill because again, you're also going to amplify the magic damage that you take. If you want to go 75 Faith here, I do think it's a half decent middle ground here where again, our enemy 50 Faith example, 84% chance to proc is pretty good in my opinion. I'm pretty comfortable with that. And even if they have the 25% resistances, I do think 53 and 72 here are still good enough. And then just pivoting a smidge here because remember, she also has stun and silence in her kit. I'm just going to use the 75 Faith here as an example. If you have 75 Faith and your enemy has 50 Faith, these both have a 31% chance to proc, so obviously a little bit lower. If the enemy is 97 Faith, it's a 43% chance. If you were curious what these are, if you were to 97 Faither, they increase a little bit from 31 to 37 and 43 to 49. Still not amazing, but a little bit higher. That's why I think 75 is a pretty decent sweet spot. And if the enemies have 25% resistance to either of these, stun or silence, then it's just a flat 0. It's not going to happen ever. So a lot of numbers here. Feel free to pause and digest them. But the overall conclusion for me, 75 Faith, probably decent sweet spot for. You'll also receive more healing as well, so that's kind of the trade-off too. Now the mastery ability, really simple one here. 10% HP, 15 ice attack for herself and allies. Increases accuracy of 15. This is obviously like a 70 cost worthy mastery ability. Really nothing too special here. That 15 accuracy, they could have put anywhere on the kit. They just decided to put it here instead. Nope, that's all you really need to know. Nothing too special. The TMR review, this is a TMR that probably will have better future usage. Stat-wise, it's not bad. 15 accuracy here, you can certainly build that higher with the right Trust Stone setup. It is a double cast ability. It's an accessory, which is nice. You can equip multiple accessories. The Human Killer 25 is good, but 25 modifier isn't that special. You can get 25 modifier from a lot of buffs, from a lot of external other TMRs other teammate buffs. To me, this is really going to get more prevalent usage when you start getting into those dual element or multi-element rainbow teams, and you start mixing and matching, like, you know, the attack types that the 25 human killer will apply to a more broad collection of characters on your team, but we're not there yet, and I don't know how long it's going to take till we get there, but that's really the only upside usage that I see this TMR. Now for my general thoughts, real upside again is the utility in my opinion. The slash damage is difficult on ice because of the slash res pen that they don't have on vision cards. Slash type attackers on ice have kind of gone by the wayside in the current state of the game, so I don't think you're going to see eye-popping numbers based off her damage output, but the utility definitely has some upside, where again, Dispel Protect, 20% pierce res to teammates, and 50% reduced counter chance. The AoE physical barrier break is the best thing in her kit in my opinion. Dispel courage obviously is handy, you just gotta get the AI to do it correctly. The potential 30% ice and power on the sub job as well. A lot of good things here. Now there's also definitely a niche for anti-pierce. This is really the other place you'd probably be using her, where if you kind of add things up here, 20% innately, 20% on that buff, 20% on her vision card, a potential 12% on the passive. We're not even including any espers or equipment or anything else at the moment. So that's a ton of pierce resistance innately. That's definitely a certain niche that she has. The attacks are skewed toward unit attacks as we saw. And then finally, I think the slash resistance penetration is a legitimate debate. Now, as you saw, she can get 40 on the passive, but there's a couple different levels of slash res pen you can get. And obviously, what's best is going to completely depend on what kind of slash resistance your enemies have. But you can get 70 if you equip her weapon. We'll see in a second. The weapon has 20, the passive is 40. You can get 50 if you wanted just the passive and the trust stone and use a different weapon. There's an option for that, we'll see. Or at minimum, you can get 30 if you just wanted to go to the weapon and the trust stone and use your passive to be a different one, whether it's the AoE resistance or the defense or the whatever you want it to be. That's where you get the flexibility. If you decide not to have that passive on, you can only get up to 30 penetration, which might be fine if your enemies don't have a lot of it. The last thing to mention is that, in my opinion, her vision card drastically changes her overall profile as well, where number one, the 35% magic shield is no joke. That's an actual legitimate piece of survivability for her. The 15 extra accuracy obviously also helps, particularly because, as I mentioned, ice from a vision card perspective does have some difficulty getting their accuracy up, so getting that as a unit buff on this card actually is a really good thing. But then finally, the 28% dexterity and the 42 on the card all go a long way too to help her buff a little bit of that accuracy. Obviously there's diminishing returns the higher you get, but it's also a big part of increasing her critical rate as well, which does help her damage output a little bit. So just keep that in mind too. There's not always a vision card that drastically changes the character, but the ability on this one of the magic shield, it definitely does. Now we look at the Esper Synergies. The nodes you obviously want to optimize here, Ice Attack and Human Killer are probably the two best ones, because you have to recall she does have a strike type attack on her main job, so those will apply to everything. The slash attack is obviously great for slash attack, and accuracy too, again, if you're trying to find creative ways to add that in. The two best Espers obviously to this day still are Chaos Odin and regular Odin, particularly for her. They both have Human Killer. There's slash attack on both. You have a variety of different resistances. They're both very fast, which is great for a unit of average agility. 2 thumbs up. Now, some creative extra Esper ideas. I think one of the more unique ones you could think of here is the Glacial Esper, where this one does have luck nodes, right? So if you are trying to increase your accuracy, that's a creative way to do it. It also has Ice Attack and Slash Attack up, so a lot of things to like there. Also has missile resistance. I think MAX is also an interesting one for ice matchups, where ice is pretty meta at the moment, that there is some ice resistance here. There's also ice attack and slash resistance on this one too. Fenrir, obviously more geared for magic resistance, but you get a modifier of 30 on all the slash nodes that are there, and some attack percent buff as well. I do think Shiva is an outside the box interesting one, if only, again, for that very unique pierce resistance build. If you want to maintain very fast agility, it's also got accuracy and ice attack up on it. But also in that same vein, I think Golem is an interesting one here too, where it has defense and pierce resistance and man killer, but obviously it's a lot slower and doesn't have those accuracy notes. So there's a couple different things you can play with here from a build perspective. I don't know if there's any clear-cut favorite other than Chaos Odin and regular Odin. Those are obviously the two best ones. The rest of them are absolutely matchup dependent. Now finally, from a weapon optimization, her weapon is no doubt an extremely good one for her. Glacial Crown. Of these 3 builds, never build the critical one. That is the most useless build here. Only 8 crit rate on it. I do think it's a toss-up whether you want to go assault or aim. I think both are materially enough in terms of the difference in attack stat and the difference in accuracy stat. Raviesse in particular will get 15 slash and strike attack from it, as well as 15 accuracy and 20 slash resistance penetration. So I think it's an excellent sword to have one of each, but there actually is a secondary sword, which is absolutely worth mentioning. It's the Shimmering Blade. And this is the +6 version that you're seeing for stats on the bottom, where from an attack stat, yes, just a smidge lower than the Glacial Crown. Not a huge deal though, as we'll see in a second. Maybe just a smidge less accuracy too, but again, only 3%. But the effects of this are 30 ice attack, which apply to both her slash and strike type. So that 30 is stronger than the 15 you get on the Glacial Crown. The slash attack of 15 is equal to the slash attack on the Glacial Crown. And crit damage 10. And her vision card has that dexterity buff that if you can get her dexterity to a respectable level and crit hit relatively often, the Shimmering Blade's actually a very good choice. And again, this all comes down to how you manage your slash resistance penetration. That if you equip the Shimmering Blade, you're absolutely going to have that passive on for 40% then, and a Trust Gnome another 10. Bam, 50% slash res pen, Shimmering Blade, excellent combination there. I'll be honest, that's probably what I'm doing 90% of the time, unless I really want that 15 accuracy here, or I really need to equip a different passive than the slash res pen. But that's the Winter Raviesse review in a nutshell. I mean, again, great character for the winter units. I think she's probably going to be used with more consistency than some of the other ones are. I don't think she's a meta-defining unit in the least. And quite honestly, I think it'd be a difficult argument to make that she would replace either Alaya, Ayaka, or Velis, or Snow in a comp of 3. Unless, again, we were seeing some drastic map change where the missile units became, too at risk of getting killed too easily, or if that utility of the AoE barrier break, the courage removal, the frostbite was far more impactful than what you'd get for damage output from the other girls. Those are my thoughts in a nutshell for now. Thanks for watching, everybody. As usual, comments, critiques on the comment section below. Appreciate the time watching, and I'll talk to you all soon.